What exactly is myoglobin? Myoglobin, to put it simply, is an oxygen-binding protein that is found inside of most mammals in different concentrations. Humans, cows, pigs, and sheep are four pretty common sources of myoglobin. Myoglobin, as a structural chemical, it is a polypeptide which contains 156 amino acids in a chain. And then you're going to have the heme group, which is the thing that binds to the oxygen, and this is the thing that contains the iron and 4 ligands to a nitrogen. And then this heme group, when it's inside of the polypeptide chain, will bind to a histidine amino acid, and that will form the 5th ligand, and then oxygen will form the 6th ligand. Iron can at a maximum form 6 ligands. Now, myoglobin isn't the thing that you probably would have heard of before, but you probably would have heard of hemoglobin, which is sort of myoglobin's big brother. It is another polypeptide chain that contains 4 separate polypeptide chains and 4 heme groups for every sort of protein. And the reason that hemoglobin is used as the oxygen transporter rather than the oxygen storer, the oxygen storer is often myoglobin, oxygen transporter is hemoglobin, is because of certain structural features. For instance, when the oxygen binds to the iron in hemoglobin, it causes some structural changes inside the protein, which means that the other 2-3 heme groups, oxygen has easier access to that and can actually bind to it, which can mean that more oxygen is able to be transported around the body. And so hemoglobin is a more efficient oxygen transporter than myoglobin is, and that's why myoglobin is used as an oxygen storer. The reason that you need an oxygen storer is that when you are going around your day-to-day life, you're breathing in all this oxygen. You may not be doing particularly strenuous exercise at every single minute of the day, so that oxygen isn't all going to be needed immediately. So it's going to be stored in myoglobin, and this myoglobin is often found inside of your skeleton, your skeletal system, and your muscles. And then this myoglobin, when you do undergo strenuous exercise, that oxygen is all going to then be released into the bloodstream to do all its muscular functions in the electron transport chain and stuff like that. That's going to then release energy, and that's why myoglobin is a necessary structural molecule to have in the human body. Now, as I mentioned before, humans, cows, sheep, and pigs often have high concentrations of myoglobin inside of their muscular systems. This is why these meats are known as red meats, because myoglobin is sort of a pigment that can make these muscles red. Chicken, for instance, which is a white meat, has a lower concentration of myoglobin than these red meats. Now, red meats are listed as group 2A carcinogens, which means they are probably causing cancer. And that is to do with the myoglobin inside of these meats. Myoglobin can cause colorectal issues. It can cause colorectal cancers, which are cancers of the colon and the rectum. And that's because when it's digested, it can form a couple of nasty chemicals, which can therefore cause cancer. Now, while you may be thinking you may have to cut out your steaks and your lambs from your diets completely, that may not necessarily be the case. Unprocessed steaks and meats, which have come straight from the animal, nothing's been done to it, not like a burger or some sausages or stuff like that. Unprocessed meats only cause a 3% increase in the rate of colorectal cancers. That actually isn't a lot when you think about it. That's probably why, even though there is technically some sort of evidence that says 3% increase, that might be why it's not necessarily a group 1 carcinogen, meaning it is shown to cause cancer in humans, because that is quite a negligible increase. Not saying that you should completely disregard it. Obviously, it's still something to look out for, especially if you already have a lot of colorectal issues. Maybe cutting red meat out from your diet, if myoglobin is something that causes digestive issues, that could be a beneficial thing for you and you specifically. But for the average person, unprocessed, so that means steaks, that means the cuts of meat, nothing like sausages or burgers or anything like that. Unprocessed meats only cause a 3% increase in colorectal cancers. However, if you eat 50 grams a day for a consistent amount of time of processed meats such as sausages, hot dogs, burgers, stuffing, salami, anything that you can think of that is meat-based but is pretty processed, that actually increases colorectal cancer by 60%. The likeliness of colorectal cancer occurring is 60%. The 50-gram figure is the same for unprocessed meats and processed meats. So if you're eating 50 grams a day on average of red meat, that is going to cause a 3% increase in colorectal cancer. That is such an absolutely insane difference and shows how bad processed meats actually can be for you and how pretty okay unprocessed meats can be for you. Obviously, if you are eating a lot of red meat on a day-to-day basis, that is going to cause some concern for your gut and for your colorectal, because obviously, I suppose if maybe you were eating 100 grams of unprocessed meats every single day on average, that would then be like a 6% chance. I'm not sure if that's how the maths worked in the study that I read, but I suppose that could potentially be an issue that you would look out for. But when you compare unprocessed meats to processed meats, I think your focus should not be on getting rid of meat entirely, because meat has nutritional benefits. Unprocessed meats, especially white meats, which is a completely unrelated sort of topic, I suppose, because white meat doesn't have the whole myoglobin issue in the first place, but meat in general has so many nutritional benefits. If you look up what foods are this and this vitamin found in, oftentimes a lot of these vitamins are commonly found inside of meat. When I was doing a lot of research and stuff for some of the vitamin videos that I produced, I was really surprised to find that in terms of like mg of vitamin per kilogram of food, meats were actually one of the highest for these figures, which really surprised me, because obviously you may think that vegetables and stuff are quite high in vitamins, and in some vitamins they are highest when it comes to mg/kg ratios. Some vitamins, such as vitamin C, are not found inside of meats whatsoever, and so if you're doing a completely meat carnivore diet, you will have to take vitamin C supplements, because otherwise you will obtain deficiencies, which is really not good. But I just thought that the nutritional benefits of red meats and white meats was actually really interesting, because I thought that the only reason people really ate it was for protein, but it does contain a high amount of nutrients, which really surprised me. But the reason that processed meats are so bad, and I'm going to go through this separately in a whole nother video, is to do with preservatives and chemicals that are added during the actual process. Now, these preservatives basically are more likely to cause cancer than not having them there, essentially, and these preservatives are used to increase shelf life inside of the products. Now, another issue I read about to do with myoglobin, which is unrelated to cancers, is that it could potentially cause some kidney issues. If there is too much myoglobin in the bloodstream, then when it has to be filtered out by your kidneys, it can almost get overwhelmed in a way if there is too much myoglobin, and that can cause potential issues. Now, I didn't really understand how this would actually be possible to happen inside of the body, because myoglobin often stays in your skeletal systems, for one, and I suppose when it's released into the bloodstream during strenuous exercise, that could potentially mean that it gets into your bloodstream. But we know that strenuous exercise is good for you, so I don't know why you'd stop doing that off for the premise that myoglobin could potentially cause kidney failure. Even though everything that you do in life has some kind of negative, it's just minimizing those negatives as much as possible, which is the thing that's beneficial for your health, essentially. And because myoglobin is a protein, and as I mentioned before, it has to be digested before actually being absorbed into the body. This will be digested by certain digestive enzymes like pepsin and trypsin and stuff, which digest proteins into their respective amino acids, and that means that these amino acids can be absorbed. But I doubt it's going to just be immediately built back up again into myoglobin and then released into the bloodstream. I doubt that's going to happen, so I don't really understand how myoglobin could potentially cause some kind of kidney failure. That could be another chemical that's sort of related to this whole issue in a way, and that also could be something to do with processed meats as well. You never really know. What I just think is interesting is that the difference between unprocessed meats and processed meats is stark, but when it comes to statistics, they're often put in the same kind of category, which is a bit of an issue in my opinion, because when you see statistics that say meat eaters are more likely to suffer from cardiovascular diseases than plant-based eaters, then like you kind of think, oh, maybe I should become a plant-based eater to avoid these issues. But that's often because processed meats are contained inside of the meat category, and processed meats are like really bad for you. They're absolutely horrible for you because of the chemicals that are contained inside of them. They're literally like sugar in a way. It's weird, but I think unprocessed meats and processed meats, when it comes to how society views food, they should be two different categories entirely, because they are so different when it comes to our health. And I think there is such a stark contrast that something needs to happen between these two. And another thing about the carcinogenic classification that I wanted to talk about, because as much as red meat does technically cause cancer, 3% increase in the likelihood of colorectal cancer occurring with 50 grams of red meat per day on average. Now, I don't eat red meat every single day. I often eat white meat on a much more regular basis, so I'm probably about, on average, eating 50 grams of red meat per day. I might have like a big steak or something one day a week, but divide that by 7 and that may end up being 50. And as much as that may mean that there is a 3% increase in the likelihood of me obtaining colorectal cancer, I feel like because it technically causes cancer, it should be group 1, but that puts it in the same level as smoking and alcohol, and there is such a stark difference. I feel like the way that it's done, where group 2A, the classification that it's currently in, is probably causes cancer in humans, I feel like there should be almost group 1 should be divided into sort of subunits, where like group 1A is like the most horrible things that will cause cancer with minimal exposure, and then group 1B or something is like as you go down to 1C, 1D, 1E, etc., the exposure that you get and the actual risk of these things causing cancer goes down. So unprocessed meats would probably be like 1F or something, which means they're really not that bad, because I suppose they have been proven to chemically cause cancer, but the risk is so negligible that I suppose they still kind of have to prove it into group 2A. I suppose 3% is such a low difference that they don't really know if it actually was the red meat that caused that, or if there was some kind of study error, experimental error in a way. So they have to put it in group 2A until there is more conclusive evidence, or until the difference in myoglobin, or until the difference in the rate of cancer actually increases and goes up with more studies to come. But I feel like the whole carcinogenic classification is just a bit weird. There are some chemicals in our society, or that exist in the world, that are so carcinogenic that it takes like nothing to basically cause cancer. But there are some chemicals where it will take a reasonable amount. Something such as alcohol would probably be like a 1C carcinogen, but then something like, I don't know, asbestos maybe would be 1A, like the big bad. And there's other chemicals that exist, like formaldehyde or something, that would be 1A, because they're quite rare things inside of society, but they still cause cancer. I don't think there is much point in putting a bigger emphasis on group 2B and 3, which is possibly causes cancer, group 2B, and probably doesn't cause cancer. I feel like putting emphasis on subunits on group 1 carcinogens, and in terms of their different risk levels and exposures, would actually be quite a smart idea. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is the best way to do it, but I don't really know, that's just what I think. But with that, I recommend subscribing for more content like this, and have a good day.